Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've had an amazing start to the week, doing whatever it is that you are doing, and welcome back to the Wealth Whisperer podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about some of the common oopsie daisies that first home buyers make, saving for a deposit, how much do you really need, loan pre-approvals, what banks might not be telling you, and the hidden costs of property and how to budget properly for it, and some of the common issues faced by first home buyers and how to handle them. And legends, just a quick heads up before we dive into everything. What I share on this podcast is general in nature and not personal financial advice. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting your beautiful faces yet, so I don't know your individual financial situation. The insights, tips and strategies that I discuss are for educational and informational purposes only. So before you make any financial decisions, please do your own research and consider speaking with a qualified professional who can tailor advice to your specific needs. So let's get started. All right, so we'll get started on common mistakes, common oopsie daisies by first home buyers. One of the ones that I used to see all the time was people buying with emotions and not logic. So the emotions can be different things. It can be falling in love with a property and not really considering either its resale value, the location, and trying to skip out on stipulations on a contract, like waiving the valuation or waiving the building and pest inspection just because you've fallen in love so much with the property. And then there's the other end of the scale, where I've seen the emotions of people who've been really tired when they've gone to an open home and they've seen that the property needs painting, it needs new flooring, the light fittings are really old, they need to replace those, and they just go, no, it's just too much hard work. Which, I hate to be the one to break this to you, but any type of property maintenance, once you purchase the property, is all on you, darling. It's all on you. So I would get used to having to do your own work around the property. And if it is just things like painting and flooring and light fittings, you're looking at maybe a couple of $1,000s. I've done it personally myself. I've done all the light fittings in the house, replaced all of them and painted every single wall in the house, and I'm telling you, it's not actually that expensive when you do it yourself. So buying with emotions is a really big thing. Make sure that you write a criteria of the property that you're after, and you just have to sometimes go with the really big things. So go with the location, or go with the room sizes. If you're looking at starting a family and all that sort of stuff, making sure the right number of bedrooms and the sizes you're happy with. And then if there's work to be done to the property, you just have to suck it up. The next common oopsie daisy is not knowing your borrowing power. When you go in to the bank, if you've gone to your bank that you've always banked with and your parents have always banked with, and you've just been there since you were 4 years old and now you're looking at doing the loan with them, the bank will approve you for an amount that they're comfortable with, not what your potential actually might be. And this is the importance of seeing a mortgage broker. I personally have a great mortgage broker. He's been doing it for quite some time, and they take a look at your full financial position, and based on their knowledge of all the lenders that are available on the entire panel, because some lenders are only available through brokers, they'll be able to tell you what your absolutely, maximum borrowing capacity will be and if it's going to be the right fit for you. So it's really important that you actually know what your borrowing power is, not just what your bank has told you it is, okay? Some of the other mistakes are things like ignoring government grants and incentives just because you don't want to have to live 20 minutes outside of town. It's crazy the amount of conversations I've had with people over the last 20 years doing their loans, when they would say, yeah, but if I go and buy in that estate where I could get the builder's grant, or back then it was the builder's grant, or now it's your first home buyer's grant and the stamp duty exemptions and all of those sorts of things, if I buy in that estate, it's going to take me an extra 20 minutes to get to work. So it's 20 minutes. You've got to change your mindset from you don't have to travel 20 minutes, an extra 20 minutes to get to work. You get to travel an extra 20 minutes to work. Use it as your opportunity to catch up with your mates. You might be sat in traffic as well, or listen to an audiobook, or listening to a podcast like this one here. To start thinking more open-minded about properties and locations and where you'd be prepared to move to, so you can take full advantage of these incentives that the government is sending your way. And another mistake that I've seen people do is skipping out on building and pest inspections, sometimes because they think it'll get them a better opportunity to buy the property, so to have their offer put in front of the vendor if they waive all the conditions of the contract. But it's a very dangerous thing to do. A building and pest inspector is there to check the current condition of the property, because as soon as you put an offer in and your offer is accepted and you sign a contract, you are accepting the property in the condition that it is. So if you then move into the property and go, oh, well, actually there's mold damage, there's termite damage, there's this, that, and the other, that's your problem now. There is absolutely no recourse for you. There's nothing that you can do. And I've seen some horror stories where people have skipped out on the building and pest inspections, and the vendor had painted over mold damage in the property. And when the new owners had moved in, obviously that mold started coming through the paint. They got somebody around to have a look at it. It was the entire floor and half of the room's walls that had to come out and get replaced. So the $25,000 that they had put aside to start a family had to go towards home renovations. So really frustrating for them, and a big lesson for them to learn to do your due diligence. So it's really important that you do all that sort of stuff. Cool bananas. I hope I've explained that well for you guys. Let's move on to our next topic. So the next topic is saving for a deposit. So how much do you really need? I know you've probably heard a lot about a 20% deposit, but you don't need 20% deposit. Once you borrow more than 80% against a property value, you have to pay what's called lender's mortgage insurance. So you might have heard that term before, but what it is, lender's mortgage insurance is an insurance premium that covers the bank and the risk that they have lent out to you. Statistically, people who borrow more than 80% of the property value go into mortgage stress at some point. So that's why there's lender's mortgage insurance, to protect the bank for when that happens. It is not an insurance policy for you. If you lose your job, it is not a policy that you can claim on to make repayments on the mortgage or any of those sorts of things. It's purely to cover the bank. So if you want to avoid paying the premium for mortgage insurance, which can be quite high, then you need to have the 20% deposit plus costs. But you don't really need that much, especially when you're a first home buyer. Now you have things like government grants that are available. You have the government guarantee that's available. You have guarantor loans that are available. There's a lot of ways that you can get around this 20% deposit myth that's going around. So with the government guarantee, if you meet the eligibility criteria, because this one does, the government guarantee has some price points on it, depending on whether or not you're buying in a capital city or if you're buying regional, and it changes from state to state. So as long as you meet the eligibility criteria for that, because there's income criteria and things like that as well for it, then how the government guarantee works, if you have a 10% deposit of the property, then the government will secure the remaining 10%, not give you the deposit, but they will secure the remaining 10% against the loan, so that the bank is only exposed to 80% of the property value with the loan amount. The government has guaranteed the remaining 10%, and then that waives the mortgage insurance premium for you. There are some restrictions on that, so make sure you have a look at the government's website and you go through the eligibility criteria and see if it's going to be something that works for you. And then you have guarantor loans. So the guarantor loans is when you have a family member, usually a parent is what the lenders will approve. and they will use one of their properties as security for the loan as well as your new purchase property. And that way that lowers the risk to the lender and it waives the mortgage insurance premium. But it will mean that you would need to borrow more if you have less deposit. So you've got to take into account what those repayments and all that sort of stuff would look like. But it would waive that mortgage insurance premium. Okay, so you don't need the 20% deposit. And in the case of a guarantor loan, you hardly need any deposit, okay? But that's a conversation you need to have with those family members because it does restrict their use of that property that they offer as security. Other things for saving up for a deposit is, looking at your different saving strategies that you have available to you. So things like side hustles. If you know it's going to take you 2 years to save up a house deposit based on the income that you have coming in now and all of your outgoings, why not look at something like Uber and doing that for 6 months to boost your savings, or Amazon Flex, which is the package delivery one, and just doing it for the 6 months, and all the money that you earn from that side hustle goes straight towards your house deposit. You've also got things like rent vesting. So if you're a group of young people and you're all wanting to buy a property but you can't afford in the area that you want to live in, you can all jump into a rental house together. You're splitting the cost of the rent, so that has lowered the risk for you guys. And then it's also lowered your outgoing expenses as well, which means you can look at buying investment properties in the other areas that you can afford to be able to buy in. So you're getting all the rental income coming through, and that's going to help increase the amount that you can borrow because your outgoings are going to be lower if you get together with, a group of people. You can also do it if it's just yourself or your personal family. Things that you just have to keep in mind though is a bank will always take 100% of your outgoing rent as an expense, and will have restrictions on the rental income that you receive for the new property plus and they would deduct expenses for that investment property as well. So if you have a high rental outgoing and a low rental incoming, that is going to affect your borrowing capacity. Just keep those things in mind, but it's a great scenario to ask your broker to run through with you. Cool. Let's move on to the next subject. The next subject is on loan pre-approvals. And this is really important because this, a lot of the time, isn't communicated very well to first home buyers. So a pre-approval, what is a pre-approval? If the pre-approval is done correctly and it is a fully assessed pre-approval, then that means the bank has checked that you've passed all the credit checks, you've got a good credit history, they verified your income to documents. So if you've gone into the bank and have provided zero documentation, you don't have a pre-approval, dude. Sorry to tell you this, you don't. You just have a piece of paper that's garbage. To get a pre-approval, a formally assessed pre-approval, you have to provide the bank with documentation so they can verify the information. You have to do the work for this, yeah? You have to be prepared for them to see your income, for them to see your bank statements of your outgoing, and if you're embarrassed about your outgoing over the last couple of months, clean that up before you go to the bank because they will need to see it. If you do not get a formally assessed pre-approval and then you go out to market with just that garbage piece of paper, what will happen is you'll put an offer in for a property, you'll then come back to the lender, then submit your documents because you want the property and you're prepared for them to see it now, and they'll go, oh, sorry, we don't take half of that income that's on that pay slip. On your outgoings, you've got afterpays and zip pay that you didn't tell us about, so your borrowing capacity is reduced by about $100,000, so you can't purchase this property. Okay, so it's just as important for you and as well as it is for the bank to go to the market with confidence to have a fully assessed pre-approval. So make sure that's what you ask for. The other thing is your borrowing power can change. So when you sign a loan application form with the bank for your pre-approval, you have agreed to the terms of that document, which says that at the time that you applied, that was your financial situation. If your financial situation changes, so if you decide then to get a new job, or you go, well, I'm about to get into a big debt with the house loan, so I'm going to increase my credit card limit now, or before getting into a property debt, I'm going to go buy myself a new car and get a loan for it, it immediately invalidates your pre-approval because your financial position has changed and you're no longer declaring the correct financial position. So be very careful with that. When you sign an agreement with the bank about what your financial position is, make sure it stays the same or improves. Do not do anything that is going to invalidate your pre-approval. The next thing is the importance of credit scores. Before you go into a bank or before you go and see a mortgage broker, make sure you check your credit file because the banks will see everything. They see everything. It's called live credit, consumer credit reporting, CCR data, and they will be able to see not only all of your credit accounts, credit cards, your Certa-Gs, your zip pays, your this, that, and all the other garbage that's out there, but they'll also be able to see your repayment history on that credit account for up to 24 months. If you haven't had great conduct on that product, even if you do close it, it is still going to show, that repayment history is still going to show on your credit report. So make sure you are across all of this information because the banks will be able to see it and they will ask you questions on it. Regardless of whether or not you think you should be paying it, so if you've got a dispute with a phone company and you're refusing to pay it, or you've got a dispute with the bank over a credit card fee and you're refusing to pay that, that damages you, nobody else, only damages you. Make sure that you make all of your repayments, everything is kept up to date because the banks have full visibility over everything, okay? And the last thing about loan pre-approvals is the loyalty tax. So again, just because your current bank has that you've always banked with has set a certain amount, if it's not in line with what you were after, if it is in line with what you're after, then fantastic. But if it's not in line with what you're after, so if they can't give you the amount that you need or the interest rate is too high and the repayments are going to impact you too greatly, shop around. Absolutely shop around. You do not have to change where your everyday banking is to have your loan with somebody else. You can have your loan with anybody and have your everyday banking stay exactly the same. So don't think you have to change everything. All right, I hope I've explained that clearly for you. If you've got any questions on things like that, send me. If you send me a DM on things like Instagram or Facebook, I only go on social medias once a week on a Sunday. Otherwise, you can shoot me through an email at erin.moran@stallionfinancialgroup.com.au and I'll come back to you with answers to your questions. All right, next topic. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is the hidden costs of property and how to budget for them properly. So some of the things that we do forget about because we get very excited about buying properties. I remember being a first home buyer and the emotional roller coaster that you go on when you're getting into the property. So it's important for you to know what are those costs up front that you'll be out of pocket for. So we're very lucky up here in Queensland that David has just abolished stamp duty for first home buyers regardless of the purchase price, and that comes into effect from the 1st of May. So if you enter into any contracts, and that's the 1st of May 2025, if you enter into a contract before that date, you will be liable for the stamp duty regulations at that time. If you're still under the purchase price threshold for stamp duty exemption, then you'll be fine. Legal fees is a cost you'll need to keep on top of. These fees can be anywhere from like $500 and up, depending on the services required and the solicitor that you choose. You need to pay these fees for a legal representative during the property purchase, which is a solicitor or conveyancer who acts on your behalf. They'll do checks on strata reports, any issues on the title, so if there's any caveats on the title, all of those sorts of things. That make sure, check to see if there's any adverse in the contract as well. So if you haven't picked up that the vendor is saying that they're going to take the oven with them because it's a freestanding oven and the oven isn't included in the sale price, I've seen some funny things. They're going to bring that to your attention. Okay, that's what you pay your legal fees for, and obviously they handle settlement on your behalf between them and the lender and your broker on settlement day. So it's important to have one of those, but it's also important to have the cost of them put aside. Then things like strata and council fees. So if you're strata and body corporate, you'll find that you'll pay in things like maybe a gated community or a high-rise building or a set of units. The strata and body corporate fees can start to get quite expensive. As soon as you see if a property is in a gated community or it is in a unit complex, make sure you are asking the questions about how much that fee is per week, because this is something else that you will need to budget for. So every time you have to put money aside for something else towards the property means you will need to redirect it from another area of your life. So keep that in mind, because we don't want to be using things like credit cards to pay strata and body corporate fees statements when they come through every quarter. That's just a vicious cycle. You have to make sure you're putting the funds aside every week from your budget to go towards these bills. Some of them can be quite high. I've seen some of them in the 300s, 350s, and body corporate fees of around $100 a week is quite reasonable. That's what I look at when I'm looking at properties. It would need to be $100 a week or less, depending on what you get from it. The higher the level of facilities you have in a building, so if you've got a pool, lifts, a gym, this, that, blah, 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 that's when your body corporate fees start to get around the $250 mark. When you have what's called a walk-up, which is, it might be a unit complex that only has 2 or 3 stories to it, then there's no lift that you have to pay for. Make sure there's no pool, no gym, none of those sorts of things. And then the cost of your body corporate and strata fees obviously don't need to be there to cover the cost of the upkeep of those things. With the lifts, they need to be serviced quite regularly. And with the things like the pools, if you get a crack in a pool and that has to be repaired and replaced and all the rest of it, and they need to resurface it, I think that's what they call it. If there's not enough money in the kitty from the strata body corporate fees that the community's been paying in, then they charge a levy. So you will have to pay a levy until the cost of that repair has been covered. So just keep things like this in mind. This is why it's so important to have something like an emergency fund as well, if something like that was to occur, because these are just the things that will pop up if you're on a body corporate or a strata. Council rates. Have a look into the council rates. The council rates that I have where I live now is exactly half of what I used to pay in my bigger properties, or in my smaller property, I should say. So I'm on 10 acres now, and I pay $1,100 per half here. Where I was in the south of Brisbane, I was on 480 square meters, and I was paying $1,000 per quarter. So it's really important that you find those sorts of things out. Other councils, it's your local council that charges it. So make sure when you're buying in the particular council that you're looking at, you have a look at their their rates, their rate fees, because different councils will charge different rates. And it's just something else that you will need to put money aside for in your budget. Cost of renovations. If you have gone and looked at a property and the agent is telling you, so yeah, this has been renovated, or you can see there's a carport there and all those sorts of things, there's a shed out the back, have they been council approved? Because the cost of the vendor's renovations to you when you then buy the property is you then become fully responsible to get that council approved. and have a chat with your insurance company. But if something happens to some part of your property, so let's say it's the carport, and it's not council approved and it collapses on top of your car, and then you've got the building inspector that comes around and then the insurance company that comes around because you put in a claim for your car and none of it was ever inspected by the local council or approved, good luck getting a payout. Good luck to you. Absolutely good luck to you. So any renovations that have been done to a property, make sure that cost doesn't come back to you by not doing your due diligence and making sure it was council approved. It's easy to get that information and your property solicitor will be able to help you with that. So again, the emergency fund, I talk about emergency funds a lot in my courses and one-on-ones with clients, but the cost of holding a property, I don't want to scare you off owning a property. It's loads of fun having your own place. But it is important that you have buffer put aside. So when you're doing your calculations of what you want to buy, don't just look at the loan repayments. The loan repayments is factor number one. Then you have the general cost. Even if you had zero loan, even if you bought cash 100% for your first property, you would still need to be putting money aside for your council rates, any maintenance costs of the properties, full electricity, full gas, if that's what you've got. You're responsible 100% for any maintenance to the property, and that's maintenance upkeep as well, which you have to do, because if you don't maintain the property and something happens to your property that say through a storm or something like that, and you haven't been maintaining the property and you go to do an insurance claim, you'd be strapped to be able to get a payout then as well. So just be very mindful of these things. It's great to be able to buy a nice big home, but you cannot expect as a first home buyer to have your parents' last house as your first house. Okay, you start your journey in the property buying business. Sometimes you have to start smaller, and that's completely fine. Where I bought with my first house, nobody knew where it was. I kept having to explain it. It was the south of Brisbane, but I would say, the name of the suburb, and they go, where the hell's that? I'm like, oh, the Yatala pie shop? I'm like, oh, yeah, I know where that is. I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's about 10 minutes from there. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll see you right in the middle of Brisbane and the Gold Coast. Okay, yeah, that's where I am. I'm like, oh, we've never heard of that place. I go, well, that's probably why I only paid $265,000 for a block of land that was 480 square meters. Okay, so sometimes you just have to. Well, I was going somewhere with that. Where was I going with that? I can't even remember now, ladies and gentlemen. I was going to make a point. Oh, yeah, but sometimes you just have to think holistically about getting into the property market. I knew I wasn't going to live there forever. That's the point I was trying to make. I knew I wasn't going to live there forever, but this was going to be my stepping stone to get me to my acreage. And when I was building, I had beautiful builders. I built through Plantation. And my building supervisor was lovely. He was the nicest guy you would ever meet. He was a New Zealander. He'd make me laugh every time I go out and do a property inspection. He was fantastic, very transparent about the build and all those sorts of things. So back then, I was able to build that 4-bedroom house. So it was 4-bedroom, 3 living areas, 2.5 bath. It was beautiful. I absolutely loved it, and I was able to build it for $400,000 back then. But this is on a single income. Okay, I had to save up the deposit and everything myself on a single income. And then, so the total cost of being able to do the whole project was $660,000. But I ripped out, the reason why the build cost was so cheap is I ripped out everything. So I had nothing, no landscaping. I had not even the concrete in the patio out the back. I ripped it all out. I ripped out all the light fittings. So I only had the plastic covers that you put over the light bulbs throughout the whole house. I just ripped it all out, and I just had whatever paint was free. And I just said, just give me all the inclusions, whatever's the inclusions, I'm just going to take that. And so I was able to build for $400,000. And then when I moved in, I spent a year doing all the landscaping out the back. And I mean, I hand laid grass myself. I would go to Bunnings. When they would get a delivery in, I'd load it in the back of the trailer, I'd take it to the house, and I would lay the soil down and lay the grass down. It rain, sunshine, wind, whatever the weather was, I was out the back in the garden doing all the landscaping. I built my own fencing. Didn't have to pay for someone to come around and do that. I learnt how to do fencing myself and built an amazing fence, and I didn't even charge my neighbours for it because it only cost me $500 when somebody else was going to charge me $5,000. So I just said to them, look, don't worry about it. I had a great time learning, and if you're happy with the condition of the fence, and like, yeah, we've had an inspector around. I'm like, brilliant. So that was all. So I was saving my money there. Then, God bless Bunnings, I'm telling you. Then I went to Bunnings and got a bunch of DIY light fittings that you don't need an electrician for. And I kitted out the house as much as I possibly could with these DIY light fittings, including a chandelier that I paid $230 for. And the reason why I only paid $230 for this chandelier is because you have to put it together yourself. That was it. So I just sat, instead of doing puzzles at night, I would just sit there watching Netflix, putting together these tiny little crystals on a chandelier. It took me 2 nights to put together, and then I hung it up myself. And then I did all the painting. So I remember all my mates at the time that I was doing my painting, I'd pour myself a glass of sherry. After I'd finished work for the night, I'd pour myself a glass of sherry and I'd go upstairs and I'd start doing the painting, and it was just loads of fun. I would listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. I'd listen to audiobooks. Again, you have to change your mindset. You don't have to do these things. You get to do these things, and you can, get an opportunity to learn new skills, have a great laugh. I mean, I made that many mistakes, mate. I ended up with paint all over myself and all the rest of it, but it was fantastic. It was loads of fun. And because of that, because I did all of that myself, to paint the entire house, to have light fittings throughout the whole house, to do all the landscaping myself, and to build a fence, and I built a fairy garden, and I hung washing line on the outside of the house as well, the clickety up ones where you lift them up. Did all of that myself, and the front yard, laid all the grass in the front yard, and a pathway, and the mailbox, did all of that myself, and it cost me $3,000. That was it. And then I sold the property for $920,000 a year later. So I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, okay, and there was no way I was going to sell it for $920 in the condition that I originally moved into the property. Yeah, it took a lot of work to get it to where it was, but it was the best investment I ever did, because then when I moved out here to my acreage, the equity that I created in that property by living in a place that nobody had heard of, doing all the work myself, learning new skills, I halved my mortgage when I came out here. Halved it. And it was 1 year of my life. That's it. 1 year of my life. I'm sure if you knew that your dream home is still coming to you, sometimes you just have to do a little bit of work first. There's stepping stones, and that's okay. That's okay. So I hope that's made you feel a little bit better. Now, the next thing we're going to go on to is some of the common issues that I've had from first home buyers, what they used to tell me. A common one is real estate agents are difficult to deal with. Now, I've had some amazing experiences with real estate agents, and I've had some not so great ones, and I get the frustration behind they never return my calls, they never answer my messages, they never return my emails, all of those sorts of things. So you've got a couple of things there. One, you can ask your lender or your mortgage broker to introduce you to a real estate agent, one that they know and they trust, and one who is going to at least keep you in the loop of communication. Okay, so you can do that. You can ask for contacts and start building out your network of people that you know. 2, you can remove the real estate agent from the equation and deal with property developers. So property developers are ones like, let me just Google this, ladies and gentlemen, because you know how I told you this is going to be real talk. I'm not going to edit any of this stuff out. So I'm going to go Queensland property developers. You might be hearing that on the keyboard. So you have ones like, am I looking here? So you've got Stockland. I actually really like Stockland's developments. You've got Centre Group, you've got the Goodman Group. There's quite a lot of them. And if you see, you could just do what I've just done then and go on Google, property developers. Probably go residential property developers in your particular state, because you don't want to, you're not looking at commercial. So go residential property developers in your particular state, go onto their website and have a look at the developments that they've got going on, because they will be building in suburbs that they might be creating a whole new suburb, which means you've never heard of the suburb before, which is why you haven't even been looking for it in realestate.com, and the developer's not advertising in realestate.com because they've got their own marketing teams that are doing other things. So it's just another option. Go in, have a look and see what the developers are doing, and then because you're buying brand new, that opens up your opportunity of potentially getting some of those grants, being eligible for that. Frasier's Property Developers is the one that I originally did my first build through, so they're a great one as well. Have a look at some of their projects. The property developer will have their own sales team, and they will hang out in the developer's sales centre, so where you go and have a look at where the development is happening and what it's going to look like at the end of the development, and all those, the scalable model stuff that they've got going on. But you'll find it's a completely different experience as opposed to dealing with a real estate agent for an established property and one who's acting on behalf of a property developer, because a property developer loves property. They love architecture. They love the environment. They love the whole idea of creating a new lifestyle. They're brilliant. I love property developers. So they have agents who are aligned with their values and are aligned with their branding, and you'll find the experience is completely different. Another way you can bypass an agent is going onto websites that don't use agents to sell properties. So at your realestate.com and domain, you have to have a real estate license. I believe you need to have the actual license before you can advertise through them. You can't advertise as an individual, I do know that. But there are websites like No Agent Property, and there's a couple of other ones where people will be selling their home, and they'll be selling it themselves, not through an agent, because they want 100% of the commission, or they've had bad experiences with agents in the past and they don't want to deal with them themselves. And there's plenty of properties on there. And I mean, it's not just properties for sale. You can look at there for rentals as well. There's private rentals that are available on there. There's a whole range of different websites that people use to sell properties themselves. Another concern or issue that I've had from first home buyers is there's so much competition at open homes. Usually when people are looking at the competition at the open homes, it's because they're buying in a popular area. So you've got to think about mass migration and natural migration. I was taught this at a property and lending seminar when the statistical analyst, trying to get that out, the statistical analyst was saying that when there's mass migration in a particular area, it's because that's the area that people know. So whether they're moving from interstate or international, they're looking at the most popular areas of that state. So if they're wanting to move to Queensland, they go, okay, so we've heard of Brisbane, we've heard of Sunshine Coast, and we've heard of the Gold Coast. That's why there's so much migration that happens there initially, because they're the popular places. That's the places that they know and trust. And if you're going to move country, you're going to want to move to somewhere that you know is a nice area, right? So that's why there's a lot of competition there. Where I moved out to is called the Somerset region. That you ask anyone, where's the Somerset region? Where's the Scenic Rim? I've never even heard of that. So they're completely different areas that nobody's heard of, because they're not the fancy ones that celebrities go and live in Australia. and there's hardly any competition. I had zero competition. I came out, saw this house, the agent called me, I went out and saw it 2 days later, I put in my offer, 45 minutes later the offer was accepted, that's it, done. No competition, no negotiating, Bob's your auntie. So sometimes you just have to, again, it's that open-mindedness about getting into your first home, is just looking outside of where people would normally buy. So you lessen the competition. Another way to lessen the competition is you're never going to alleviate, obviously, the people that rock up. But if you go to an open home with a fully assessed pre-approval and you know exactly how much your maximum purchase price is, and you know exactly what the conditions are of your contract because your broker or your lender has told you that they can get full formal loan approval with property valuations and all that sort of stuff done in 5 days. In Queensland, you normally have 14 days as a finance cooling off period, or as the finance clause, I should say. If you have conditions on a contract that's 5 days, imagine you're the person who's selling the home. And the person who's put the offer in on your property, you've got one person who said it's going to be 2 weeks to find out whether or not they can buy it, or you've got someone who's got 5 days before they'll know if they can buy it. And the offer is exactly the same dollar-wise. I'm going with the one that's going to find out in 5 bloody days because I've got things to do. I want to sell this house because I'm trying to move. So if you improve the condition of your offer, that can help alleviate some of the competition when you're looking at open homes, okay? Other things is how to negotiate on properties. This is a really important one, negotiation skills. It is a skill. And don't be scared about asking the questions. They're going to be prepared for you to ask these questions, okay? The only advice that I'll give you here is don't play silly buggers. I've had people go, well, I didn't personally think that it was worth, 900,000, so I went in with 800,000. I said, but the offer was, the advertisement or the property was for sale for offers over 900,000. So why did you go in with 800,000? I didn't agree with it. So don't put an offer in, because what you've done now is you've shown that agent that you're a bit of a numpty. Okay, you're just making up numbers and they're not interested. They won't return your phone calls. They won't return your messages. They won't return your emails because they just don't think that you're serious about buying a property. If you were to say to the agent, look, it's a really nice house, but I just don't want to pay the 900,000 for it. I really hope, that the vendor ends up getting what they want. If you have something that's similar to this, might need a bit of work, that's fine, but I need it to be around that 800,000 mark. Can you please let me know? I'd be happy to jump on an inspection as soon as you get it. You have a much better chance of getting a relationship with that real estate agent of what he's got coming up in the books than you do if you were to try to negotiate something stupid. Okay, so just don't do that. When you are in a position to negotiate on a property, again, make sure you've got that formally assessed or that fully assessed pre-approval, so it's only subject to valuations. Ask your lender or your broker for a property report. It's usually one that they get generated from companies like CoreLogic or RP Data, and it will give you an idea of what the market is saying the property is valued at by looking at the sales data. So don't look at the properties that are currently for sale, because that's what a vendor wants to sell their property for. Look at the sales data, so what properties have sold for, because that's what the market has actually agreed the property is worth, is when it's the sale value. Okay, so have a look at those sorts of things. That will give you an idea about what offer to put in, and then just put your best foot forward, and you get much better, a lot more respect from the agents and vendors when you're going in with your best foot forward and you've done your own research. And then just walk away. If something doesn't feel right, just trust your gut. Sometimes you just have to walk away. It can take a while to buy a property. It can take months to find the home for you, and that's fine. It's fine. It's not like you're buying a car, or it's not like you're buying a handbag or a new pair of shoes. This is a house. You're asking the bank for more than $500,000 to go and buy a home that you're going to go and live in. It's going to take a little bit longer than other purchases you've made in your life to feel right. Okay, so something just doesn't feel right, just be prepared to walk away. All right, so I hope you found that information helpful, ladies and gentlemen. If you've got any other questions around property or buying property, make sure you either comment below so I can come back to you, or shoot me through an email, as I said, at erin.moran@stallionfinancialgroup.com.au. And if need be, I can line you up with an appropriate mortgage broker if that's the advice that you need to have. And if you've got a friend who's house hunting right now and has a few concerns, make sure you send them this podcast so they can have a bit of a listen to it and might help to answer some of their questions. I look forward to chatting with you again next week. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone. Bye.